Right, Maddie, back at it. Another day, another podcast. It's getting busy now, isn't it?
It is. It's getting very busy.
Plenty of people coming on soon. We've got a great waiting list. We had a really great podcast. Who with?
We spoke to Murray Ross from Avalon Planning and Heritage. Murray owns a planning consultancy and they are based down in the Quay in Exeter, and it was a gorgeous venue, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that view.
Amazing location, which you will see if you're watching on YouTube. What did you learn about this conversation?
Probably the main thing that I learned was planning can take a fair amount of time, but there is a reason for it. Murray really explains why the impact of waiting and understanding all of the regulations that come along with it, and also the precautions of not having a planning application in the first place.
Really interesting conversation. I've been through the planning sort of process myself a few times at various different levels with my own sort of personal projects, and I didn't enjoy the experience. But I feel like understanding more about, the reasons for the planning processes, it will really help for the next time. Hopefully there won't be next time for myself. But I think we also went through like a really few interesting points about how the planning process can be sped up by the individual, but also by, the planners too. So really good conversation.
Great conversation. Enjoy.
Okay, welcome Murray to the Conquering Podcast.
Hi.
Thank you very much for being here.
No
Can
worries.
you tell us a little bit about your business and tell us a little bit about your industry?
Yeah, sure. So Avalon Planning and Heritage, I started just myself back in 2014 in sunny North Devon. Set out just to provide that professional service in helping clients, and that ranges from everything from some big commercial developers, institutions, right down to some domestic householders.
Helping them do what?
Helping them get planning permission,
Okay.
or listed building consent. And holding their hands through that process, because I think for a lot of people, it's a minefield, and it's probably more of a minefield now than it's ever been. So
very simply then, Avalon does planning.
in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
So would you say your industry is the planning industry? Is that how you define it, or how would you go about that?
Yeah. So the planning development industry, and particularly dealing with historic buildings and conservation areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So my perception of the planning industry then,
Yeah.
I don't have an awful lot of experience with it, but
Okay.
I do remember a couple of years ago I was trying to change the house, put a little bit of an extension on.
Right.
I didn't even need to go through like proper planning regulations. I think it was called permitted planning or permitted
Right.
development.
Yeah.
So barely had to do anything, and it was
Wow.
a bloody nightmare.
Yes.
So I had awful experience with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like other people also have pretty bad experiences with planning. I don't really hear many like good stories come out of like the whole planning application process. It can seem a little bit long, slow, laborious, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Is that right?
So I think most people would agree that at the present moment, the planning system, is not in a good place, and a lot of that, again, I think most people would agree, is down to resourcing in local authorities. There's in all the councils we deal with some excellent planning officers and conservation officers. They're brilliant, but they're really up against it with the workload they've got to get through. And so when you're dealing with that, and you're dealing with officers that are juggling so many different projects, and they've only got a small amount of time to put to your application each week, then I think from an applicant's point of view, you can become quite frustrated. And I think that's where us as consultants, we like to add value by having those relationships with planning officers and conservation officers, where hopefully we can we can streamline that process.
Okay.
Has it always been like that, the planning process? You're saying that it currently feels quite hard, but
it probably feels like it's been that for a long time.
yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't say it's always been like that. I think it's perhaps progressively got a little bit worse. And you hear a lot of people will say, even yesterday someone came up to me and said, "Oh, I hear they're going to streamline the process and make it easier to get planning permission." You talk about permitted development rights, but unfortunately, inevitably, what happens is they actually just create another hurdle or another process to go through that's maybe not particularly clear, and so planning officers maybe aren't familiar with it, applicants aren't familiar with it, also councils aren't necessarily getting a decent application fee for it, so they're maybe not a priority to them. So yeah, there's a lot of improvements that
do all applications go through the council then? Is that literally how it goes?
So if you need planning permission or list of building consent, it goes
that'll be
through
your local authority.
That'll be your local council, whether it's here Exeter or
Okay.
yeah.
And how? Sorry.
Yeah.
How long does it usually take?
So it should take, if you're dealing with a house, someone's house, the statutory time frame would be 8 weeks. And that's, if you're looking to build a new house, for instance. But if it's what we call a major planning application, that'd be 13 weeks. But
much longer than that.
9 times out of 10, they're taking longer at the moment. And I think I think a lot of planning consultants, we like to remain, nowadays in the current system, we like to remain outcome focused. So we will tell applicants at the beginning it's going to take longer than those 8 weeks or 13 weeks. But if we can remain outcome focused, so get the right decision for your site, okay, it might take a month longer. But if we've known that from the outset and you get that right decision, then it's
managing expectations, I suppose,
exactly
that sort of
that.
stuff, isn't it? Because there's always going to be a bit of slip on these sort of things, isn't there? There's always those sort of stories. How often do you get applications which are, like quicker than timescales agreed?
Yeah,
I imagine it's a lot.
It does happen.
Does it?
It does happen. You get some that don't take the 8 weeks or 13 weeks, or they're kind of on the nose, which is great. And that again comes down to working really closely with the council, but also providing as much detailed information up front, so they've got everything up front when the application lands on their desk. And a lot of the time nowadays, where you find some of the delays occur can be where we have to deal with what we call statutory bodies. That's bodies such as Environment Agency, Historic England, because it has to go out to them. They have to look at it. They provide comments.
It's not just the council that have to approve all this sort of stuff as well. There's lots of other things.
And the officer you're dealing with at the council will be relying upon that information from those statutory bodies.
So why do we need planning? I guess the answer is because all havoc would play loose, wouldn't it? If everybody did what they want. But
yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, yeah. So it's about controlling the built environment. To ensure we have a development that we're all happy with, but also is consistent with the environment around us. Because if Joe Bloggs went and built his house in a field without any permission, there could be concerns around the local environment, whether that's rivers around the site or trees or hedgerows, but also the impact upon neighbours.
There's quite a lot to consider, isn't there? How do we speed up this process then? How do we speed up things and make them happen? Is it more people? Is it better processes?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree that it's more resourcing. Local authorities are screaming out for more resourcing. They would probably say they need to be paid more as well.
Like everyone else.
Yeah. If there's more bums on seats in local authorities, then we're going to get through more applications. And, then that means developers can come along, apply for development on their site, and they can be on site building and delivering more housing quicker.
Do you see that making any improvements anytime soon?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
No. Yeah.
Does it all come down to money then? Is that literally it? Are these councils that underfunded? If they had more money to put more effort, more resource into having more people doing the planning, managing the application process, would it be as simple as that, speeding up the whole thing?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, so as of December last year, the government increased planning application fees. And the only challenge with that is a lot of that money is not ring fenced to a planning department, so it can go to other areas of a council. Whereas if it was ring fenced within that department, they could resource better, bring in more staff. And we hear from some applicants, particularly where we're dealing with quite contentious developments or complex developments, where they might happily pay more fees if they knew they're going to get a decision on time. And there are systems in place that allow for that, but those don't always perform well either.
Yeah. How would you then, from like a strategic point of view, how would you change the whole planning system?
I think the planning system's got a long way to go in terms of innovation and digitising, which is happening. We're seeing things come through now from government level, where they're getting on board with organisations such as Urban Intelligence. I think are doing a lot with them, local government level, to digitise a lot of the planning system. I think it's got a long way to go. There's a lot of information online on councils' websites. If you're an applicant and you're trying to find out, right, can I get planning permission for X on my site or with my house? Can I build 10 houses? If you're a bit cold to planning, it's an absolute minefield. And there's a lot of documents on there that are quite important documents that are still in PDF format, and you wouldn't know where to begin.
You wouldn't?
No, but then that's where we come in.
Yeah, that's where you come in. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So do you feel like the built environment or just the planning application process is actually quite behind, from a technological point of view?
Yeah.
How would you improve that? What would you do differently if you had the keys to the castle? How would you change it?
So it is very much behind. I think, so they're doing a lot, like I said, with digitising and innovating what's online. I think that's still got a long way to go because, with all technology and innovation, we've got to embrace it as a sector. So AI, for instance, we've got to embrace it. We can't ignore it. But I even think AI can't get past local authorities because of the information that's on there. It's in so many different formats, PDF, Word documents, you name it. I think all that has got to be centralised, which, like I said, I think that's in the process of happening. But once that's centralised, then I think all that information becomes much more freely accessible. And hopefully that will speed up the process and break through a lot of barriers.
Okay. So if I was, say my situation earlier, permitted development, if I wanted to put an extension on my house, that sort of thing, if I need to get permitted development, if I actually needed, bigger, more planning permission, that sort of thing, what would be your best advice to somebody going through that process who's about to start looking at the application?
Yeah.
How would you make that easier for them?
So there are some for that scale of development. There's some useful tools available online on a website called Planning Portal, which everyone generally uses for submitting planning applications nowadays. But there's also some useful tools on there if you are a householder and you're looking at something like, can I build an extension or can I build an outbuilding? There's some really useful tools on there to look at that. And then if you're still not clear, if you can speak to anyone at the council, I would recommend doing that.
Is that easy?
No. Yeah. So, only a few years ago, a lot of councils had what you call a duty planning officer, and they would take it in turns to sit on a desk in a council offices when they were all in the office. And as a member of the public, you could come in and you could sit down with an officer for, say, half an hour, no charge, and badger them about your extension. That doesn't really exist anymore. And you know, even having those ad hoc conversations with an officer don't exist as much anymore. And that again comes down to resourcing, because they don't have the time.
That would have been extremely useful for me, for somebody like myself, because I didn't know where to start. You know, I had a few people pointing me in the right kind of direction, but it still felt so overwhelming. I think with that sort of stuff, you want somebody to tell you exactly what to do, exactly where to look. And you don't want it to be something online where you have to decide if you're looking at the right sort of things yourself.
Yeah.
You want somebody from the council, don't you, to actually say, this is what you need to do. These are the sort of, you know, hoops you need to jump through.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's extremely helpful. And I would still recommend trying it today, because some councils, if you can get hold of an officer, they'll have a quick chat with you. And like I said, they're really good officers. And if in doubt, you know, you could, you know, if you call a consultant like Avalon, then we'll give you half an hour for free.
Does Avalon speak to? There you go, little plug.
That's a sales pitch.
Does Avalon do you deal with that sort of smaller stuff? Is that?
Yeah, we will do. I mean, we don't do a huge amount of it, but we will do. And I think the reason we do is because a lot of the developments we do deal with tend to be in quite sensitive locations. So, you know, okay, it might only be a household extension, but it might be a household extension on a listed building or in a conservation area or what have you, in which case it wouldn't necessarily benefit from permitted development rights. And it needs to be a bit more thought through in terms of the design and interventions. Yeah.
So you wouldn't get involved in that because it can be done quite simply by the person who's going for that.
Yeah, I think so. And I would rather just guide them in the right direction and send them on their way, rather than spending money on a consultant that's maybe not necessary.
Yeah. What I'm curious about, and I think this might be a silly question, Mary, but what if I wanted to have an extension on my, let's say I had a grade 2 listed house, and I just didn't go through any of the planning regulations? Obviously I'm not going to do this, but if I did, what would happen?
Well, so if it's a listed building, like you said, so grade 2 listed, then technically that's a criminal offence.
Is it?
So you're off to jail.
Getting locked up.
What if it's not listed?
If it's not listed, then the enforcement officer will come knocking when they find out about it. And you tend to find that 8 or 9% of enforcement cases arise through a nosy neighbour.
Really?
The enforcement team at your local council, their wider team is the community. So a nosy neighbour...
Snitches.
England... Well,
stitches.
England's the best place for NIMBYs and nosy neighbours. A nosy neighbour will realise, oh, hang on a minute, you've gone... That shouldn't be there. They'll call up the council, say my neighbour's just plonked up this extension without permission. The enforcement officer will come knocking. And they again, they're very good. They'll tend to have a polite conversation initially. And if you're forthcoming, submit a retrospective planning application to authorise it. If, however, you were quite vociferous and aggressive in response and say, hang on a minute, I just want to build an extension, I'm not going to submit an application, then they'll serve you an enforcement notice, which again you can still challenge if you believe there's a right to challenge. But if it goes all the way down the line, then you'll either end up having to take it down, or if it's a listed building, you'll be charged.
Wow. So it's serious.
Yeah, it can be.
It's a must do, basically. Wow.
There you go.
So let's flip that sort of question around. And I said then, you sort of went through what you did, what advice you could give to people like us, like more residential, smaller sort of projects. I'm guessing the sort of bigger projects have to be done through a planning consultant. Is that right? Either sort of in-house or externally? Is that usually how it goes?
Well, yeah, generally, I'm not going to say they have to be every time, because there's some excellent teams of developers out there or architects who manage the planning process perfectly well.
And that'll just be an add-on to what they do. They'll sort of understand the regulations and that. And
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
I think the benefits you get with a planning consultant or heritage consultant is you're that sort of dedicated pair of hands leading the planning application, or what I call holding the hand of the applicant through the planning or heritage process, and having those conversations with the key people at the council or Historic England or other statutory bodies, and just take it out of their hands. So, for instance, the architect can focus on the drawings solely, and the developer can focus on the other matters in terms of delivering the development. Yeah.
What advice would you give to sort of the bigger clients that work with you to make your job as easy as possible? What does a good client look like to you?
I think a good client who is realistic of the planning process, which I can sympathise to some extent. I do sympathise massively with them. It is incredibly frustrating at the moment, the planning process, but it comes back to, like we said earlier, about managing expectations and trying to remain outcome focused on achieving that right outcome for the right scheme they want, within a sensible time frame. But yeah, unfortunately at the moment, a lot of the time it's not going to happen within those statutory timeframes, particularly for those larger, more complex developments.
Would clients come to you for typically the difficult ones to get through planning, or will they come to you for sort of any odd job almost? Yeah,
a mixture of everything really. We deal with some really fascinating sites that we're dealing with one at the minute that's got a number of grade 2-star listed assets, registered park and garden. It's got scheduled monuments, elements that are on the heritage at risk register, some really significant bats, trees, watercourses, you name it, it's there. But those, I think for us as consultants, those are the really fascinating schemes you want to be working on, and you get a really, really good team of professionals around you, because we're the planning consultants, but we also rely upon ecologists, landscape architects, the architects, heritage consultants, and it's fascinating working with all those team of people. Yeah.
Cool. So we've been through the industry then. I kind of feel like I've got a better understanding of the industry now, because I think most people are probably like that. It's a bit of a minefield, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Anybody walking down the street that you ask them what planning is and what the process is, I don't know if they'd be able to answer it. And I reckon they probably all have maybe a negative experience of going through that planning application process through the councils.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to know about it. But let's talk a little bit more about your journey.
Okay.
Let's throw it right back to where you actually wanted to get into planning. What made you want to get into planning?
Okay.
Now that we've spoken about how difficult it is to go through the application, why do you want to be a planner?
Let's reflect back. So for me, I was one of those people at school. I loved geography, all sides of geography, but I guess perhaps human geography. And then came to my A levels, and you're making those university choices. And funny enough, I was looking at courses to do with archaeology and sports science at the time.
Similar,
yeah. And then I bumped into a really good friend of mine, and you're sort of asking each other, what are you going to go and do? And he said, well, I'm doing city and regional planning at Cardiff University. I thought, that sounds really good. Like it just resonated with me. As quite a vocational course, not just geography, very vocational. It just really resonated with me. I thought, that sounds brilliant. So yeah, signed up from there. And I think a lot of my inspiration came from, so I grew up in Weston-super-Mare, which is your traditional Victorian seaside resort, a little bit run down in places. And growing up in an area like that, you know, you always feel like, I'm very fond of Western, but I feel like it could always do better, you know, much like areas in Devon or Cornwall. And so you kind of think to yourself, well, how do I get in a position where I can help shape that built environment? So yeah.
Did that come before you did the course, that sort of mindset, or when you did the course and got into it, you actually found the passion for, you know, being able to help the wider community and actually help the development of that area?
I think the mindset was there. I just didn't realise it at the time.
Yeah.
You know, because you grow up. I think we all probably, wherever we grew up, you probably don't always talk positively about your hometown. You know. But I genuinely feel that, you know, Weston's a great town, but it's got a huge amount of potential, and it's on that journey. But yeah, I think that passion was always there, and it was only when, you know, I went on to Cardiff and studied city and regional planning that I think all that comes out.
Did you enjoy your time at uni?
I did.
Uni?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Too much?
Sorry?
Too much?
Possibly. Can't talk about that.
Was it what you expected then? Because again, like we said earlier,
Yeah.
planning, I feel like it's got a bit of a perception. I didn't really know what it was until I sort of tried to go through the process myself. And even then, I didn't feel like I actually understood the full process. For you, was it what you thought it was? Did you have this perception of it? You went into it and that perception was, you know, turned out to be the case, or was it
Yeah, I mean,
different?
so it was a fantastic course, fantastic university. And as part of that course, we did a 3rd year placement in practice. I went to what was then White Young Green, that became WYG, that now is Tetra Tech in Bristol, in their Bristol office. Great team of people, and I still stand by. I learned a vast amount in about 2 weeks. My first 2 weeks, hit the ground running, and you then learn the real, what I call like the nitty gritty of planning. You know, literally step by step, going out, looking at a site, you know, in its flesh, putting together a planning application, working with all those other consultants, packaging it together, speaking to the council, and then working through that decision process. That's where I learned about that, and that's where I learned, actually, yeah, this is something really, really fascinating that I want to work in.
What sort of skills do you need to have to be a good planner? Is it quite admin heavy?
It can be, but for me, a lot of it, a huge amount of it comes down to communication. You're dealing with people in all different departments. So again, earlier I talked about, you know, you've got the planning officer, but you're also dealing with really, really important statutory bodies. They're all coming at it from a different angle. You know, you've got highways department saying this access needs to be changed, or you need more parking. You've got the tree officer saying you can't take down that tree. Or
there's a tree officer.
Yeah, there's a tree officer. Yeah.
Sounds like a good job.
Yeah. It's a great job. You know, they'll be wanting to protect their trees. Then you've got the ecologist who wants to make sure that the bats are protected. You've got Historic England, or the conservation officer who want to protect the historic buildings. And they're all coming at it from different angles. And you've got to balance all those inputs to make sure the outcome's right and it's delivered. And so for me, it all comes down to communication, because you're also trying to then communicate with the client and keep them in a good place, really, throughout the whole process. Yeah. So.
What was your biggest lesson on your placement year? Have you got any projects that you look back on and think, oh, I learned a lot there?
Gosh. So I remember when I was on my placement, at the time I was working for a client that, so they build supermarkets. They're a supermarket operator. And what you realise with any, I'd say, it's not just supermarkets, it's development of any large scale where it can be quite contentious. It brings out a lot of people and a lot of objections, often quite vociferous. And But for me, that's one of the beauties of the planning process in this country. We're a democracy. And so when you go to, I really like the planning committee, for instance. That's a sad fact. But a planning committee is where what I say, you see democracy in action. I'd recommend it to anybody. You see people turn up with placards saying, don't build here, over my dead body, not in my backyard, there or there. But in reality, that's one of the beauties of our planning process. It is a democracy where people can come out and voice their opinion. I do feel that part of planning needs addressing, because we do have a problem with NIMBYs in this country, and their comments are probably taken too far, shall we say. But nonetheless, I think that's one of the things I really enjoyed from my placement, was attending a planning committee and seeing that process in action. Yeah.
How would you address the whole NIMBY situation? It's a difficult one, isn't it? Really?
It is.
Everyone's got that opinion.
Yeah, and I think we've got to if we remain a democracy, then that process has got to be there. But in my opinion, what should happen is comments from third parties, so your local residents, should be vetted. Much like when we submit a planning application, it has to go through what's called a validation process. So they have to make sure all the right documents and plans are there to enable the planning officer to make his or her decision. And then what tends to happen is local residents submit comments and they don't tend to be vetted. You can end up on planning applications. I was reading one this morning that had 600 objections.
Is that common?
600's quite a lot. We've had planning applications 300. We had one for a dog walking field not far outside of Exeter that had, I think, close to 100 comments. A dog walking field.
It's quite a nice use for a field.
It's a great use.
If they can have anything in their backyard.
Yeah, but what happens is these comments just get fired in without being vetted, and a lot of them aren't what we call material, so they don't have material reasons for an objection in there. They can just be like, I don't know, I don't like dogs, which is not a material reason. And so I think if that process went through some sort of vetting, so someone was looking at those comments saying, well, I'm sorry, you haven't made a material objection there, then it doesn't go through. And I think you'd find that would probably get rid of
that weed out a lot.
50% of objections.
Because I suppose 600 comments and that sounds like an awful lot, but if only 50 of them have actual genuine reason. A lot of people like to complain about stuff, don't they?
Yeah.
It's all about the actual substance that within those
Absolutely.
complaints, isn't it? But you're saying the process doesn't account for that. It just accounts for the amount of comments.
Yeah, and I think it's a shame. It's a shame for a lot of reasons. It's a shame for those people that have made material comments, because to some extent
Get watered down.
They get watered down. They get overlooked. They're maybe just not as important in the eyes of the officer. But also, it's just, again, it's more resource. It's more resource to the officer. They've got to look through all those comments. It's more resource to us, because we like to go through those comments to pull out the key themes. So it's all just lost time. And a lot of those comments are just not material, and they just
So I'm just thinking, why should we speed up the planning process? What would be the benefits of speeding up the planning process? We're talking here about it like it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Is that the case? What would happen if there was a quicker process?
So if it's a quicker process, we could be delivering housing quicker. I was reading an article about a case. It got approved a couple of weeks ago. And it was only for a modest scheme. I think it was like 45 houses. It took 5 years to get planning permission. Yeah. Through 2 appeals, and then eventually got approved. Now, there's a lot that's probably happened in that time, so there's, if I was in their shoes, you're probably questioning, well, will that even be delivered? And so the point being, if we're delivering planning permissions quicker, then we're delivering housing quicker. So people are getting into housing and getting into affordable housing quicker, which ultimately puts less strain on councils and housing departments.
Because that's a huge talking point at the moment, isn't it?
Massively.
Immigration, the amount of people that need social housing and just housing in general.
Yeah.
Would that bring down house prices as well?
It should do, yeah. At that level of the market, it will bring down house prices to make it more affordable for people. At the moment, we're not building enough houses. It's only pushing the house prices up, making it more and more affordable when people are already overstretched. I think some applications, I'm not talking about your standard housing applications, but some applications where there are a lot of contentious issues, could be heritage, could be ecology, maybe do need a bit more time for consideration. Perhaps not the time it is taking, but they do need to be a bit more thought through. Yeah.
So it sounds like if the government are pushing, all these figures around building more houses, and I know they target more and more every year, don't they, or try to, the best thing they can do is make the planning applications easier, quicker, invest more into planning for the housing sector, and in turn, they'll get more people into houses, they'll bring down the cost of housing, but they'll probably make more money off the back of, their investment, the houses they'll sell, help to buy.
Yeah.
I mean,
it just gets that whole
win-win
circle
for them,
going.
isn't it?
Yeah, it gets the whole wheel going. Yeah.
So that's what they should do. I think we just
There we go. We've
just
nailed
worked
it.
it out.
So why aren't they doing that?
So I mean, why wouldn't a government do that? Why wouldn't they make the planning application quicker, easier?
I don't know. They seem to apply sticking plasters constantly. And I think if you think for governments, I think what tends to happen, a lot of it's political bandwagging. They can say, hey, look, we're going to introduce this new permitted development right. And hey, aren't we a great government because we've just enabled you to build an extension or convert an office building into residential. And hey, that's fantastic. But when you drill down into the detail, a lot of the time they haven't necessarily made it that much easier or quicker.
They've just added something on.
Yeah, they've just added a hurdle. And again, I go back to my point earlier, they've probably reduced the application fee that the council are getting for that same service.
So they're actually telling them to do more
for less.
For less.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? I was reading last night that the whole tax code and the whole tax system, fairly similar actually, is so complicated because more governments add on. I think the sort of HMRC tax code, it said in 2010 it was around 10,000 pages. In 2020, it's now 20,000 pages. Because if they're doing exactly the same thing as what you've just spoken about with applications, they're adding on more and more and more, making it more and more difficult, which might be a good thing for planning consultants like yourself, because it makes it a little bit harder to go through these sort of things. But actually, they're slowing themselves down. It's costing more. They're having to do more for less.
Yeah.
When if they just rewrote the whole tax code, or in this instance the planning application specifically for housing, that'd be the easiest and the best thing one of the best things they could possibly do to actually increase housing production.
100%.
Well done, guys.
Nailed it.
Crazy. I actually feel like I understand it now. Slowly getting to grips. But we have gone off on a bit of a tangent there, haven't we? Because we were going on to your journey. How long did you sort of go into practice before you actually set up your business?
So once I finished at Cardiff, did a master's, went to London for around 6 years, and worked for some of the large consultancies in London, and I worked for a really cool small team in southwest London, where we were doing a lot of the work similar to what we do here at Avalon, really. And then with a move down to Devon, that kind of struck up the desire to set up on my own.
Why did you move down to Devon?
It's just that the lifestyle move. Those typical Londoners moving down to Devon.
Everyone comes crawling back.
That's it. We went from zone 3 of London to the middle of nowhere in North Devon, and beautiful location, peace and quiet on a Monday morning.
So did you almost set up the business out of necessity rather than want to be a business owner?
It was a it was definitely driven by necessity, but I wasn't necessarily scared about setting up as business. And I kind of always felt that there was an opportunity there, and quite like the idea of running my own ship, and looking after clients and building a business. That was always I think a bit of a burning desire.
So you always knew you were going to do that eventually, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I always had that desire to build a small team and develop my own brand and business.
What was the plan then when you set that business up? Because I think every business owner goes through a bit of a journey with what they want from their business, doesn't it? So what did that look like for you back then when you set up the business? What was your intention?
So when I set up back in February 2014, little old me, even from the outset, my plan was I wanted to build it into a team. I didn't just want to be a one-man band and just muddle on through. I always wanted to build into a team, and I always said to myself, right, I want to build a team of 5 to 10 people. That would be great. And it was all about providing that professional service to a variety of clients. I didn't want to rule anybody out necessarily, because I feel that we can add value at any level. Providing professional service and holding their hand through that process. And, I still believe we do that today, and we work across the whole Southwest region, Southeast, and up into the Midlands.
Okay.
How did you get your first client? Do you remember?
I do remember my first invoice. Yeah. And it's from a really nice client who we still do work with today. Really, really nice chap. He's based in London. But this was a project in Plymouth, funny enough, and it was £800. And I remember jumping up and down, thinking,
start.
Happy days,
Got a
there
business.
we go. I can pay the mortgage. And remember that really well.
What was the project?
It was a permitted development scheme for the conversion of some upper floor office space to residential. Yeah.
So did all your projects start off really small like that and then eventually get bigger as it sort of went on, or?
Yeah, it's funny. It's all relative, isn't it? Because when I started out, there was a lot of sort of one-off houses or backland developments, that type of thing. But it's all relative. You find yourself, okay, I'm now dealing with a site of, I don't know, 10 apartments. And at the time when you're on your own, you think, crikey, hang on a minute. Right, this is big. But then as you grow and you build a team, and, we've taken on much bigger, more complex projects, that as a team with the right skill sets, we can manage comfortably. It all just becomes relative. And so 10 apartments that I dealt with 10 years ago,
Now feels
Not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
So take us back to the sort of first days for Avalon. Did you have an office? Were you sitting in the kitchen? Were you really like solo one-man band sitting in the shed in the garden? What did it look like? Paint the picture for us.
I've got a really good image that I dug out the other day. And it was, I sat at a dining room table like this, door open to the garden there. It was just open to the garden and these fields. And we had a puppy at the time, Flossie, sat at the door. She was tiny then, and that was my day. I'd sit at this desk, looking out, and be tapping away on the keyboard, on the phone constantly. Luckily, middle of nowhere, but we had amazing internet. Couldn't believe it.
I was going to ask that. What was your whole strategy around getting started? Was it all business development? Were you just constantly trying to find clients, or was it word of mouth? Did you already have a client before you sort of jumped into things? How did it work?
Yes, we had some contacts to begin, which was a really good stepping stone, transition, just to help you get started. And then I think a lot of it is network, it's referrals, it's networking. You've got to get out there and bang the drum and talk to people about what you do, how you do it, who you are. But also just, I think, people work with people. So if you get on with someone, you build a really good rapport, generally they're going to, you get, if you sort of get on with one another, then
come back and refer you or something like that.
Yeah.
And, I always say, I often like to say to people in the team, the best form of networking is actually just doing a really good job. If you do a really good job for somebody, they'll either come back to you if they've got another task, or they'll refer you on to someone else. So that old saying, you're only as good as your last job.
Yeah,
that's true.
I'm interested in hearing how you came up with the name Avalon.
Avalon.
Yeah. What's the story behind that?
So, I didn't just pluck it out of thin air. And it's not to do with King Arthur either. So I grew up in Weston-super-Mare in Somerset, and had a few friends who lived out on the Somerset levels, and used to spend a bit of time out there. Very fond of that area of Somerset in particular. And so when it came to thinking of a business idea, that was like number one, just came into my head, just Avalon. And I just thought that sounds like a really cool name.
Is there a place out there called Avalon then? Is it?
So the Vale of Avalon, which is sort of Glastonbury, Somerset. Yeah.
Have you been to Glastonbury, the festival?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Many good memories.
Yeah.
Not for discussion.
Right,
Yeah.
So it's actually, you've decided on a place sort of thing. Did you come up with that quickly, or?
I did. Yeah. It was almost instantaneous. I just, it was there. And it's funny, isn't it? When you come up with that business name, I thought, oh, that's great. No one out there can't be anyone else out there called Avalon, and then you realise there's lots of businesses that have Avalon in the name. I can't
think of any. I didn't even know there was the Avalon.
A place in Somerset.
There you go. You'll see them everywhere now.
Yeah,
you'll see.
It's that thing, isn't it, where you learn about something and then all of a sudden it just comes up.
Cropping up everywhere.
Yeah.
So what was the next point? So you've got the name, that was easy.
Yeah.
What was your next point in creating Avalon? Did you get the website up and running? Or?
Yeah. So so we did create a website.
Did you create it?
The very first one I did. Yeah, not very good. Yeah, not very good. But it did the job. Did the website, did business cards, the very first ones, and then after. So that was 24. So it must have been about 2 years later. Really good friend of mine, Peter Gibbons, still really good friends today, came along and helped me with a fantastic website. He's helped us with our most recent one as well, and our sort of business cards and branding and stuff like that. And that comes back to my whole point earlier about people and communication. And Pete, I've known for many years. We met through cycling, and so had I not met Pete, I wouldn't have such a fantastic website.
That's good. Okay, so going into I suppose taking it on a little bit, when did you start feeling like the business was growing? Do you know what I mean? Because I suppose that every business owner gets to that point where they think, right, we're ticking along now. How did you grow the business?
It was quite a sort of an occasion, I don't know, a year or so ago, where I was telling you earlier about I'd always set out to build a team. I wanted to build a team of 5 to 10 fantastic people, and I think I was having this conversation with someone else, and it struck me like a bolt of lightning. I was like, crap, I've done it.
Yeah.
Like out of nowhere. And I hadn't, it's because, when you're running a business day to day, you often don't have that opportunity to reflect and look back. And I think I'd recommend that to a lot of people I used to do it in the early days when it was just me, but you should always take the opportunity to try and reflect, because that's really important for your objectives. But yeah, so it hit me like a bolt of lightning, and I realised, crikey, I've got a team of 10 people, and we've got all these clients and these jobs, and crikey, people know about us, and people are talking about us, which is all a fantastic thing. And if nothing else, it was an opportunity for a big pat on the back. But at the same time, you can't really take your foot off the gas. And again, you've got to reflect look backwards, look forwards. Keep going.
How did you start that growth? How did it get there? When did you start to feel like you were growing a team?
Nick Bishop joined us in 2019 to head up the heritage team and hit the ground running. Did a great job of building a client base and a team there. And then shortly after that, we took on more staff in planning and in heritage. Around about end of 2021, early 2022, we really had a good team going. And I think a lot of it's about getting the right people in the right places. It's going out there, speaking to people, making sure you've got the right people in your team who've got the right skill set, because sometimes you get in a fantastic person in a role and you think, crikey, right, we need 10 of them, But actually that's not the answer. If you had 10 of them, you probably have 10 headaches. So it's about making sure you've got the right spectrum of people who all bring something different to the party.
Is that, would you say, how your business has grown then? That's been the best thing for your business, is having the right people in the right kind of places, and that's really accelerated the growth? Because that's quite a bit of growth, isn't it? 2019 to now, adding 10 more people in comparison to the growth that you had 2014 to 19. That's quite an explosion, isn't it? Really?
It's very quick. Yeah, it's very quick. And, I think what you find happens is, you get members of staff in, if they're really good at their job, they're getting referrals. They're also going out, speaking to people, meeting people that are perhaps speaking to more people. And then, the more work starts coming in, and you need to be able to feed that work.
It's definitely, I could see it being very lonely, sort of starting a business on your own. And there's so much you have to do. There's only so much time in the day, isn't there, really? Like building a website, business cards, little bits and bobs like that, networking. I can understand why, you bring on one person who's the right kind of person, you share that workload. That's when you actually get the opportunity to work on the business rather than always within the business. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I mean, someone told me in the early days, they said to me, if it might be my wife actually, said, you need to try and apply the 70-30 rule. 70% in the business, 30% on the business. I don't know.
Is it
how many times I've applied that successfully? I don't know. I try my best, but certainly, like you say, the idea is if you can get a fantastic team of people in that do their job brilliantly and service the clients brilliantly, then at my level, you've got your eyes and ears out, looking at strategy and opportunities for further growth, or to further service your clients and the team.
So to summarise that then, for you, I feel like, your best advice for somebody hoping to grow their business and do what you've done, find the right kind of people to start off with, but spend more time working on the business by delegating work to other people, rather than always being completely within the business.
100%. Yeah. So when I was growing Avalon, for a long time, I used a pool of contractors for pieces of work, and it took me a long time to make that leap to take on my first employee, probably longer than it should have done, but it was the best thing I ever did. That comes down to finding the right person, and I was very fortunate, but if you find that right person and it clicks, then you'll never look back.
How did you go about finding the right person?
I was lucky, I guess. I had an advert on the website. So I had an advert on the website. That was kind of it at the time. And Nick was moving down from London. Again, typical Londoner, moving down to the countryside, wife and
taking
two
all
kids.
our jobs.
Yeah, just drawn by the sunshine and ice cream, and moving down with his two daughters and wife, and I think he was searching on the internet, came across Avalon, thought that looks like a good fit. In fact, I think the thing he liked was we did the bicycle breakfast ride.
Nice.
And he said, I want to be part of that.
Yeah. The breakfast ride.
Yeah. not the work. Yeah. I keep meaning to bring that back, but so he reached out, we went and had a coffee, and then I sealed the deal by taking him and the family out for lunch on the River X Cafe.
Nice.
And it just so happened to be a beautiful, bright, sunny day, like one of those days that never happens. And sold. I mean,
nice.
But you can't say no to the River X Cafe, can you? So well done.
What's been like the hardest part of running your business for you?
I think it's juggling. I'd put it down to, you know, when you're running the business, it's really fun and exciting at the same time, but you're juggling 100 things in one day. You know, that's. Yeah, it could be you're having a conversation with an accountant one moment, you're having to have a really important meeting with a client the next, you're having to head out to lunch with another client, then you're having to maybe sit down with a member of your team that really needs some input on a particular project, which is really important. And then there might be a HR issue or whatever. So you're constantly juggling, and everything's top priority. I think that's the hardest thing, or it's certainly a learning curve anyway, and it's learning how to manage all those priorities.
How have you learned?
Have you
still learning?
Some really good email inbox sifting. That's the way. It's also, again, it sort of comes back to your team. If you've got a great team around you and you can rely upon them, then, you know, utilize that, you know, and if it's an enjoyable place to work, then they'll service that.
What's the best part of running your own business?
Again, it's the people. I think that comes back to building the business in the first place. I like to think of myself as a people person, and I just, if you can come to work and work in a place where you've got a fantastic group of people around you, 9 till 5 or 8 till 7, then it's a happy day, and that's brilliant. And you've collaborated, you've shared ideas, you've had a laugh and a giggle along the way, and you've come away, you've learned something, you've achieved something, and you've helped your clients on their journey. Then that's all good news, and it's a fun and rewarding place to be. Yeah.
Do you? It's quite an interesting question. Do you consider yourself like a business owner, or do you consider yourself somebody who's had a passion for planning and has built a business out of your passion? Or, you know, have you got quite big ambitions with this? Are you quite into like the whole business side of things, or is it all sort of slotted into place quite nicely around you?
I mean, I do enjoy the business side of things. Yeah. But it's funny. I consider it almost like a shared achievement, if you want to call it that. Like, I'm the owner of the business on paper, but at the end of the day, myself and the team have all achieved that. I couldn't have done it without them. So yes, it's my name above the door, but they're all part of that journey as well. But yeah, I certainly enjoy the business side of things. I like the variety it brings.
How much do you work on that side?
I'd say more so now than in the past. But that's because I've got the team around me that I can rely upon to do the work.
To be able to do it.
Yeah.
Do you have like a business inspiration? You know, somebody that you look up to, that you kind of want to model things on, or how do you grow as a business person?
I think it's difficult. That, like, I say to a lot of people, you know, steer your own ship. There's crikey, there's so many books and, you know, inspirational figures out there in the business world. You could lose yourself, but at the end of the day, they've all got there by steering their own ship. Yes, there's people. I think, God, yeah, that's a fantastic model, like Yvon Chouinard. I don't know if you know, who set up Patagonia, a clothing brand.
He's sold it now, hasn't he? He's given it all away or something.
To the environment, to the world.
Yeah.
So he wrote a book let my people go surfing, which is fascinating. I'd recommend it.
Yeah.
But, you know, am I going to go and build a business around Patagonia? No. But, you know, there's little principles you can take away from that, that you think, yeah, that's really useful. But yeah, steer your own ship. Try not to be too distracted by what other people are doing.
Interesting.
How do you make the planning process easy for your clients then? I'm just interested in what's the USP of Avalon?
So I put it down to holding the hands of our clients and taking them through that process, because I think, as we discussed earlier, there can be a lot of headaches or frustrations or hurdles in the planning process. And so if we can take that away from the client, they don't have to deal with that. And a lot of that comes down to communicating with the council, the planning officer, or people like Historic England regularly. You know, so we'll be on the phone or emailing planning officer on a regular basis for updates, or to try and talk through a planning application, so the applicant doesn't have to do that. You know, and they can often be quite technical conversations. You know, I love the one we had in London a few years ago for an air conditioning unit. That it was an air conditioning unit in a conservation area on a flat roof, and it took a lot longer than it should have done. But we love reflecting back on the air conditioning unit. Yeah.
That's interesting. What does Avalon do differently then?
I like to think we're a friendly bunch of consultants that are extremely qualified in what we do, whether that be planning, and that could be planning for one spectacular house, right up to, you know, some really contentious developments. And we've got the skill sets in house for planning and heritage, and also archaeology, to deal with those issues. And I like to think that we do it in a really professional and timely manner.
How do you get business? How do you get your clients? You said earlier it's a lot of referrals and networking. Is that your main kind of strategy?
Yeah, I think, you know, again, people work with people. So, you know, it's all about building those relationships and maintaining those relationships. You know, true story, I had a client call me last Friday, who I haven't heard from for about 4 years, I think. And, you know, we pick up the phone. It was like I spoke to him yesterday. He's just got an issue he's dealing with at the moment in London where he needs some help. And I think, again, it's about those relationships. And whenever I go out and network or business development, I like to be quite honest and open with people, and, you know, find that common interest. And generally, if you can get on with somebody and have a laugh with them, then you'll probably work well together.
And do you think that's going to be your strategy moving forward to grow the business even further?
I think, you know, what we tend to do now is there's a bit more strategy around that, in terms of a bit more targeted. And that's both in terms of looking after existing relationships. We do a lot of work with some quite big institutions as well. So it's about, maintaining those existing relationships, but also going out and being a bit more targeted with new clients. You know, we do a lot of work with some fantastic architects, which we love doing. So it's about looking after our relationships there and seeing what other architects are out there we can work with as well.
Yeah. And in terms of targeting, I suppose what I'm getting at is, do you have any sort of marketing strategy to get there? Or is the target, you know, I'm going to call these people because that's who we want to work with next?
I think, you know, for us, it's all about, so we look out there for people who we perhaps align with in terms of our values and the types of projects they're working on. And generally, you know, we found if we find a practice like that and we get in touch with them, before you know it, we've arranged a coffee and we're going to sit down and have a chat and see what comes of it. And, you know, also a lot of these things in terms of generating new work can be quite a slow burn. And I think that's a good lesson for anyone setting out in business is don't expect miracles overnight. You know, these things can take time. You know, and I've built relationship with new clients where it can take months, if not maybe a year, for that first project to come online. So just take your time and
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I would agree. It's a slow burner.
Yeah.
Would you, I know earlier you mentioned that the industry is becoming more innovative. And I know earlier you said that you're now on Instagram. And what is your strategy in that sense? Like what's your marketing and how's it going?
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot more online with our social. So Maya, who joined us last year, it's not her primary role, but she's just been doing a fantastic job at it. You know, she's a heritage grad basically, but she's taken the reins of our social for LinkedIn, Instagram, maybe now TikTok, and she's. You know, we had a little cheer in the office the other day because I think we reached 800 followers on Instagram.
Oh,
which
wow, that's amazing.
I was like, yeah, you know. So, yeah, we want to do a lot more around that. And Maya's always badgering me for, you know, can we do this? Can we do that? And she's always been really innovative in that world, which is great. You know, you need that energy on that side of things.
Do you see the importance of it?
I do, yeah. Look, we're a changing world. We've changed a lot already, and you know, it's funny because you go out and catch up with people, and they'll say, "Oh, see you're doing a lot. Seen you a lot online." I'm like, really? You know, but that's just because of what's going on in the background, and we've sort of increased that level of activity, and it's clearly working. And one of these things with networking, business development, I said from the outset, that slow burn, for me, it's all about familiarity. So the more people hear your name, see your name, when they need you, if you're
top of mind.
Yeah,
exactly.
Keeping them, reminding them that you're there. I think like networking and like the whole social media side of things quite similar, aren't they, really? Because that is the objective. They should be sort of the long play, really. You don't go out and do networking for like immediate results like that. And sometimes it will happen. And sometimes it will on social media. You know, you might post one thing and then get a client from that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it rarely happens, but it is very much to try and become a sort of, not a household name, but maybe like a local name that people know of to build that sort of presence.
And I think what we found that's really worked for us is being able to actually get our faces out on Instagram and all of the socials. Like it is scary, but I mean, you're doing a great job of it even today, but getting in front of a camera and getting your personality across, because we were speaking the other day to a guest on the podcast, and he was saying that through like marketing and networking, it's not a ROI, it's a ROR, which is return on relationship and the return on engagement. And I think that speaks volumes for what marketing can do. And, you know, like we've just said, it's not a straight away result, but getting your face out there and being, you know, the planning consultant that people reach out for. They know your face, they know your personality. I think that will sometimes speaks volumes over just some text of a testimonial, actually being able to see you.
100%. And I've always said to the team, you know, you got to look after every client, no matter how small the project is, because I've always said you never know where your next job is going to come from, because I've had situations where I've been dealing with a very, very small job. You've built a really good relationship with the client, and they'll go and speak to someone that's perhaps working on something enormous.
Who's got a mate.
And they'll say, oh, you know, give them a call. They're fantastic. And before you know it, it's just crept up. And so, you never know where that next job's going to come from.
And online marketing just amplifies that, doesn't it? Because the amount of reach you can get from social media, you might get, you know, 10,000 impressions or a reach from one post sort of thing. you never know who can be in that 10,000.
Exactly. And I think
Yeah.
it's even just understanding that people will be seeing your content and have no idea about planning and heritage, and being able to add value to them by even just a brief summary of what it actually is that they need, or what could happen if they don't need it, if they don't use it, I think could add so much value to your audience.
Is that part of your strategy for growth then, would you say, the sort of marketing side of things, or that sort of digital marketing?
100%. I think now, the team we are, the size we are, I think we've just got to make better utilisation of that. And we're already doing it, and we're already thinking of other ideas. And I think it's about adapting to that change and trying to ride that wave, not trying to...
I think it sounds like you guys have actually got things to talk about and post about. Do you know what I mean? Once you get to the stage where 100%. You're a sort of 10-person business, you're networking, relationships, you've got things going on in the office, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
People want to understand that, don't they?
Yeah, and I think also, we work on some really, really fascinating projects, and at some point we can't always talk about it, but there will be a point where we can. And I think it'd be great to be able to get that out into the wider world, because I think, we find it exciting. And we're not all geeks, and I'm sure everyone out there would really find it fascinating.
Definitely. There's nosy neighbours outside, but online they're even nosier.
So we've done it a bit of a disservice because we skipped over it, and I think we spoke about it when we first got in here, but this office, this location, we've moved on to Avalon. The view is unbelievable. Tell us a little bit, Avalon, where are we at the moment, sort of what your niches are, what you do, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so, we're a team of 11 in total. Flossie's still there, the dog.
Nice.
Yeah, she's just older and grumpier. Team of 11 people. We're here at the Generator down at Exeter Quay, which we love being down here because we're in the heart of Exeter. We love being in Exeter. It's great for a lot of the team. A lot of the team walk or cycle to the office. It's a fun place to be, especially in the summer when the bars are open.
Yeah.
I think, I think as I said earlier, we work on a whole variety of projects, from complex, spectacular houses, even we're working with a moment with a celebrity house in Somerset. I won't say any more than that.
Yeah, no names.
Yeah. And, write up some really complex schemes working with institutions and organisations and big sort of country estates across the country. And I think our niche, if there's a niche for us, I think it's where we pull on all our disciplines. So, we've had some fantastic projects working at the moment where we're putting on our planning expertise, but also our heritage team are managing those heritage assets and archaeology as well. And when we're all working together like that as a team, I just think it's fantastic because we're all sat in the same room and we can spin round and talk to one another. And so I think for us as a team, it's a better outcome, and also for the client. Yeah.
Fab. Okay, and you've been going for sort of 10 or so years now, haven't you?
Yeah.
We're in Exeter. Amazing location, isn't it? It's tough to not keep looking at the birds that are flying past and stuff. There's an awful lot to look at out there. But what's the vision for the business? I know you probably can't say too much, but where do you want it to go? Because you've actually now done what you set out to at the start. Now that you've hit those goals, where do you go from here?
Yeah, so that's why when I go back to my point earlier about reflecting, it's always really important to make sure you do reflect on where you've been and where you want to go. Because like you say, I've reached that 10-person team, which is great, pat on the back, but not much time for a pat on the back. You've got to keep going. And so where do we want to go to next? I think we want to grow the team, but sustainably. We have grown very quickly, but we've got a great foundation now, both in terms of team, but also brand and portfolio of work. And we've got fantastic relationships with planning departments, but also the wider professional world in which we work, which is a fantastic foundation. And then in terms of Avalon, we want to look at other disciplines if we can. We feel that we've got planning, heritage, and archaeology, but we want to see if there's other disciplines we can bring in.
What do they look like?
Sorry,
what do they look like?
I can't say too much at this stage.
Secret.
I'm going to keep that under wraps.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot we could be doing as a company to really advance on our service to clients, and continue to grow and develop the team we've got as well.
Is it going to be sort of very much organic growth for the time being, or is there like a headcount target that you want to go for? How intentional are you going to be with this growth?
I don't think there's necessarily a headcount target at this stage. I think particularly with market conditions at the minute, we've got to sort of remain responsive to that. And it's, certainly in the past 2 or 3 years, we've all experienced quite intensive fluctuations, shall we say. So we're going to respond to that, but I feel like we're at a comfortable number at the moment, but, we want to grow, but sustainably. Yeah.
Okay.
And how do you plan on getting there?
So it's about finding the right people in the right places for the company. So, as happens when you're growing a company and you've got 11 people, you're looking at structure and making sure we've got the right people in the right places. And, because we want the people in there to be going up the ladder and developing their careers. And so we want to make sure we've got the skill sets in the right places. And so we need to keep our finger on the pulse with what other planners are out there, both, the graduate level right up to the senior level.
How do you want Avalon to be perceived by your clients?
Yeah, so I really admire those practices that aren't necessarily big and bold and, hundreds of people. I really admire the smaller, what I call like expert practices. And I see a lot of these in architects firms where you can tell they are just an absolute go-to expert in their field. They're not necessarily the biggest or boldest or marketing left, right and centre, but if you're a client that needs that particular service and right, I'm going to go to them, they're the best. That's where I want Avalon to be that go-to professional practice that is reliable and professional. Not necessarily the biggest and boldest.
Do you feel like you're there at the moment?
No, I think we've managed to achieve a lot in the time we've been on that sort of quick growth journey, and I think you're always developing, you're always growing. I think it'd be naive to say, right, there you go, we've made it. I think that's possibly a dangerous sort of answer to give yourself. I think you need to constantly say you can do better. We should always be striving to do better.
Yeah. No business wants to sit still.
No.
I feel like we've learned so much today, especially about planning and heritage and about Avalon. And it sounds like Murray, it's been a really successful 10 or so years for you and Avalon. But do you feel like you're successful professionally?
I think recently you sort of have that moment of reflection and you see the journey you've come on. Particularly in the early days, a lot of hustle, a lot of sleepless nights, that type. I mean, they don't go away. But yeah, so I do feel like, hey, you know what, you deserve a pat on the back. Well done. That comes with a lot of hard work, but I think there's also a glimmer of what's the word? What's it called? imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah.
There's a glimmer of that where you just sort of think, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's only when other people, you know, friends and family sort of sit around and say, oh, you know, well done, you know,
It's that reflecting again, isn't it? When you sit back and actually see what you've done rather than just taking it day by day.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what about personally? Do you feel successful personally?
That's a continued growth as well. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking sort of, there's success in the business, but you've got to balance that success outside of business. Yeah.
Do you feel like you're doing that?
It's could do better.
I think that's a lot of people's answers.
Could do better is probably the right answer there. Yeah.
And how would you define success? What's your definition?
I think that's it's different. It's obviously different for everyone, isn't it? You know, everyone. Yeah. Some people want to strive for multi-million pounds, big house, etc. I think if you're content in yourself and I don't know, you're proud of what you do day to day, you're happy in your work, you're happy in life. Not every day, 100% of the time. That's just not realistic. But you're generally content in what you do, and you feel like you deliver for your customers in whatever that is you do, but also you're providing a happy home life as well. You know, I think that's generally success. I think, you know, you can go and strive for the multi-millions, but you're probably going to compromise a lot on the way, in my opinion. I don't know.
Definitely. Well, Fab, thanks very much for joining us on the podcast.
Pleasure.
I definitely feel like I've educated myself a little bit more about it. I think that's great for people thinking about going through the planning application because it's really simplified things. But I think it's also what's really good is actually understanding of what actually goes on with the planning application and why it's going on, rather than people feeling like it's just a barrier you have to jump through.
And I think it'll be nice for people to hear that, you know, even you, a planning consultant, understands that it's hard to go through the planning process. Just makes it a bit more relatable, I think.
Definitely. Yeah. If anybody is thinking about going through that planning process, then get in touch, because if you're happy to have that conversation, point them in the right kind of direction.
Happy to have a chat.
You know, you're always there. One of you or consultants, it's certainly worthwhile doing, isn't it? So
no
thanks
problems.
very much for coming on the pod.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Cheers.